Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Tuesday evening. Joining us from the Cox Pavilion at the UNLV campus in Las Vegas, Tim Bontemps.
You know, it's a veteran move, MacMahon. When Brian said I was in the Cox Pavilion without even asking where I was, it's almost like he's had to be here for many, many games, like we all have.
I was at the first ever Summer League at the Cox Pavilion in 2005, and where they basically filled the stands with campers because it was 197 degrees, and they to put people in the stands during the day, they just brought in the kids who were at camp and just put them in there, and they screamed and didn't pay attention. And Dwight Howard committed; he was a rookie, and he committed like 11 fouls a game because you couldn't foul out. Joining us,
it's 10 now.
I know, but back then there wasn't a limit. They had the Dwight Howard rule. They had to put in 10. Joining us from Dallas, Texas, where he just beat his sons mercilessly in 1-on-2 basketball and then dragged them on to explain what happened like they were at a press conference. Span MacMahon.
Howdy, partner. This is actually 1v1v1. Hit him with the old southpaw slam the door, the Kyrie style. Lefty hook to close things out again. It was a good day. Hey, the free gear parade is back on, by the way. Actually, I've got a couple stored up. Wasn't able to get to them in the playoffs. But look, boys, this from Scenic World in Katoomba, Australia, the Blue Mountains of Australia. Frankly, I'd never heard of it before, but you ain't the only worldwide one here. My man Axel Lane, the grand poobah of marketing down there for Scenic World, sent me a nice little care package. Beautiful place. I'd never heard of it, but Google it. And
I would love to do
you got a worldwide appetite for free gear. That's for sure.
I would love to do a live pod tour to Manila and Australia.
Dude, we could do it. They've got this. This is the world's steepest rail car. We could do it while riding down that thing. Or they've got these cable cars that go from like mountain to mountain. I don't know if you guys have the stomach for that, but we could do it on that.
He's earning that T-shirt, Bontemps.
He sure is.
I got
doing
like
some
5
straight.
T-shirts. There was like 5 of them in the package.
Did the T-shirt come with a check? Straight marketing campaign.
Well, thank you to Australia's steepest railway. In business news today, you were at the Klay Thompson press conference. There was a whole bunch of press conferences on Tuesday of new players with their teams. We'll get to some of them here, but the headliner was Klay speaking to the media in Dallas. What did he have to say, MacMahon?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway is, as you might have expected, he seemed like a guy who just had a weight lifted off his shoulders, was, happy, smiling, acknowledged. He didn't go into great detail about why he was not happy toward the end of the tenure of Golden State, but, acknowledged it was a tough year, kept talking about the fresh start, said he thought he was going to be re-energized, rejuvenated.
Well, your lead quote was, I feel wanted again.
Yeah, feel wanted.
Subtweet at the old Warriors.
No question about that. And, he's obviously excited about the fit. Talked about wearing number 31, gave a shout out to Jason Terry, who, won a championship in Dallas wearing 31, but he's wearing it because one of his childhood heroes is Reggie Miller, who he's 83s away from passing on the all-time list, and that's even bigger. That's even a bigger deal than passing Kyle Korver on that list. But he won. Obviously Kyrie's got his 11, so he's going to wear 31 when he's passing Reggie Miller. But he truly comes in here believing, as he said, that he has a lot of great basketball left in the tank, that he can be a part of getting the Mavs over that hump. And it's going to be an adjustment. For example, he has to adjust from that ocean life to, he said he's got a lake boat, a Boston whaler, he said. So he's looking forward to getting out on the lakes here. He said on his cheat days, he's going to enjoy some of that Texas barbecue. I don't know. Speaking of marketing, I'm not sure if Klay had seen, there's a large billboard that I was made aware of from Velvet Taco, which is a bomb-ass taco spot here. Welcome.
Here comes more T-shirts.
Welcome to the big, hopefully tacos. Welcome to the Big D, Klay, and T-shirts. Anything with a T. Hit us up for free tacos for the next 3 years. That's the offer on a billboard to Klay Thompson. I recommend that he take him up on that. But no, I mean, like I said, he just tough go for him the last really 5 years in Golden State, but especially last year, as far as feeling like he's back from injuries, but not wanted, appreciated, whatever you want to call it. They want him in Dallas. They appreciate him in Dallas, and he's looking forward to getting a lot of clean looks created by Luka and Kyrie. And he said, you still got to guard him. And he ain't lying about that. He's going to create some space for those guys too.
Yeah. I mean, you go to these press conferences in the event that somebody talks smack or makes a big giant guarantee. For the most part, it was perfunctory. He had an opportunity to slather the Warriors in love, and he passed on that. As you'd expect, he had an opportunity to rip the Warriors, and passed on almost all of that.
Absolutely.
And focused on the Mavs, which is, what you'd expect. And we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting to see when the schedule makers have Dallas go to Golden State.
That's going to be Christmas Day for sure.
Yeah, you'd figure that would definitely be on Christmas.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Christmas and or the opener for those teams, I would think.
Yeah, you don't want a return game in the opener. I mean, they could play in Dallas in the opener.
Yeah.
But you don't want that. You don't want the return game in the opener. It's not.
It's gotta be Warriors Mavs on Christmas Day in the Bay. That's what it's gotta be.
Yeah. But I suppose it's possible, the draw for the in-season tournament, like the in-season tournament, it's not scripted. So maybe they would take advantage to guarantee it before the in-season tournament. I don't know. Like the last year they didn't show the draw. They just announced the teams. Seemed like a missed opportunity. And they just
they're doing that out here on Friday, so it'll be
it's this week already. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, but obviously Klay versus the Warriors is by far going to be the most anticipated return game. Paul George was the biggest free agency departure in terms of shifting, power in the league, that sort of a thing. But he doesn't have the equity anywhere close to the equity that Klay Thompson has in Golden State. So, and look, he'll be showered with love. We'll see how much he returns as far as to the organization. I think certainly to Steph and teammates he will, and to the fans. But
we'll see. Like New York at Boston on ring night seems very natural.
Could be the Sixers too.
Could be the Sixers. We'll see how TNT's schedule looks in what could be their last year broadcasting games. We'll see if the NBA handles that. But that would be a TNT on ring night. But yeah, Philly or New York would be terrific in Boston. I think you could see that. But that wouldn't be a bad opening night. Boston hosting either New York or Philly, and Warriors playing at Dallas. A little late game for you there, MacMahon. I could see that happening. 9:00 local. I'm sure you'll love that.
I suspect we're going to see the Lakers on opening night for the potential of
right.
Bronny and Bron playing in the opener, which I also suspect will happen.
Always a good guess.
Lakers Warriors on opening night wouldn't be too bad. Suns at Lakers on opening night wouldn't be too bad. We could Nuggets at Lakers. We'll see.
Suns?
Why not? I don't
like
know if you heard, but the Suns have multiple.
Brian's still on the bandwagon. He's still on the bandwagon.
To be an opening night team, I think
he's the only one left on the bandwagon, but he's on it still.
Like the Suns probably a playoff team again, but as far as like opening night draw, I don't know about that.
I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware, but the three biggest draws remain Curry, LeBron, and Durant. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. And Bontemps is there with them right now. We'll have some Durant discussion a little bit later. Speaking of Paul George and the Sixers, Kawhi Leonard spoke about Paul and Ty Lue also today at Team USA festivities. Bontemps didn't say that much. He said it wasn't a surprise that Paul left. I would agree with that. That was a slow motion breakup.
The much more interesting things were said by Paul George on his podcast earlier this week, which you should recount for everybody.
Well, there were two things that I took away as headlines, and if you had other ones, you can jump in. One was current and one was past. The current one was that the initial offer that he got back during the season was 2 years and $60 million.
That was a what? And listen, a lot of people would love to be overpaid at $30 million a year, but the simple fact of the matter is that is a 60 cents on the dollar type of offer.
And who knows, like maybe there was a third year that was partial guarantee. Like the Clippers aren't offering a formal rebuttal. I hope for their sake that there was kind of a fake third year in there, because if it was a straight 2 and 60, I mean, I guess you always lowball in the first offer, but
Do you think they lowball? You think they went to Kawhi and said, "Hey, 2 for 60? What do you think?" You don't lowball in the first offer to a guy who you feel like is a face of the franchise. We can win a title with superstar.
Well, there's low balling and there's a flat ball, and I would say that one was flat ball.
That was it. That was in the dirt, like Wendy's going to do with the rubber ducks.
yeah. So look, I mean, the actions for the Clippers throughout this whole process scream we didn't want him.
I to go back to what we've talked about, what the Clippers clearly decided was that they were not good enough to justify spending to an insane degree on this team. And so if they were going to have him on the team, it was going to be on their terms. And as you hear, like the interesting thing was hearing Paul George sort of lay out how these negotiations went. And they were very clearly on the Clippers' terms all the way along, where he just kept not being very thrilled with it. And eventually they got to the point where they offered him more or less the same thing as Kawhi. And he said, "Hey, I'd like to stay here and not get traded."
Well, you said
I'd
they
like a
didn't
no trade
actually,
clause.
they didn't actually get him to Kawhi.
Well, they did at the end.
At
You
the
said they
very
did.
end.
Yeah.
At the very end.
And look, if they had, and I thought the negotiation all made sense, where he said, "All right, if you're going to give me the same thing, I'll take a no trade clause or give me a max." They didn't want to do a no trade clause because they wanted to be able to trade him. They didn't want to give him a max because they didn't want to spend that much money. And so he left.
And
So,
listen, asking for a no trade clause is a perfectly reasonable thing to request because he did not want to get Blake.
That's right.
You know,
And look,
like when Blake
it all-
Griffin signed up, hey, Clipper for life. Next thing you know, he was freezing his butt off in Detroit.
Yeah. I think it all made sense for how it played out. And, certainly the big beneficiary is Philly, who also is the beneficiary of Caleb Martin making some
we'll talk about that in a
financial
second.
choices.
We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to talk about the other thing in this podcast that I found hard to believe. He said that back in 2019, Paul George said this, that his final choice with Kawhi was the Clippers or the Raptors.
Yeah, that wasn't really new information.
Excuse me? I did not know that.
But it wasn't really, that was talked about at the time.
That Paul George would go to the Raptors?
Yes.
Do you remember that, MacMahon?
It was talked about
I
at the
don't
time.
remember it, but I did see, I'm blanking on which Toronto reporter. There was a tweet from back then where I think it was Bruce Arthur, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, that tweet obviously got some attention this week and people were bringing it back up.
Oh, I missed it all.
And he mentioned like, hey, this is getting some attention now. Basically, this was a discussion, but not something that was like close to happening at the time.
No way. They both are from LA. The Clippers were leveraged by Kawhi walking to the Lakers, and that's why they gave all of that stuff.
Yeah, the Raptors had some discussions about possibly trading for Paul George back then. And I mean, they ended up not getting that close to being done, but it was out there at the time that was discussed, and
okay, well,
he ended
I
up
did
with
not
the
remember
Clippers.
that. I did not remember that. So I don't find that trade plausible to have ever happened, but okay. That did stop me. So, all right. We'll
here's
that.
Here's the tweet from the time. This is from July 6, 2019. And it is Bruce Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma City asked for Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, and 4 unprotected first-round picks as a starting point for Paul George. The Raptors believed they were being used as leverage and believed Kawhi finally truly wanted LA, and then he left.
Yeah, so there was a spate of reporting out of Toronto after Kawhi left about all these demands that were getting made by Kawhi, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that just got buried to me.
I lived through it at the time. It was definitely something that was out there in the universe.
Oh yeah,
but
there's the evidence right there. I mean,
yeah,
he had,
but
he
it
had this
wasn't.
freaking
But it
offer.
wasn't. But yeah, I don't think it was. I don't think it was. I would say it was a similar choice to the Clippers Sixers choice for Paul
And
George.
what's crazy
where-
is as much as they were asking for from Toronto, and Siakam was what, the second best player on a championship team and an all-star at that point. Had he been an all-star? He was at least on the path. Anyways,
He
as
was
much-
great that year. I don't remember.
He had a huge game 6 and to win them the title.
They were asking for two really damn good players from a championship team, a whole bunch of picks, and they ended up making a much better deal with the Clippers.
That's true. That's true. All right. So Bontemps referenced Caleb Martin. He had his press conference with the Sixers. He signed a 4-year, $32 million deal to, I guess, to be one of their starters. And it had been reported over the last week, and I know it to be true. It's accurate. That he had turned down before he opted out of his contract with the Heat. The Heat had offered him a $65 million extension that included the opt-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have opted into his deal and then gotten a 4-year extension off of it.
Right.
What was the opt-in number?
It's about 7.5, I think, or 8 million.
Called 8. Okay.
Probably roughly what he was going to make this. He was going to make this year from Philly.
So basically, it would have been opt-in, and you get the full mid-level essentially.
Pretty much.
He, and he did talk about it today, and he said, "You're always going to wish you could make as much money as you can. It's part of the game. It's part of life. You live and you learn. You take risks. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't." Now, let me just say that I appreciate his honesty there.
Yeah.
And let me just also say, it wasn't like he ended up signing in Russia. He got.
It's not like a Schroeder situation where he turned down 80 and then signed for, a small fraction of that.
I mean, he turned down 65 and signed for half of it. I'd say it's a pretty big.
Well,
still a pretty big haircut.
Quite
Like
apples to
Noel,
apples.
Nerlens Noel turned down, I think the number was 82, and ended up basically playing out his career on a.
Yeah, and then he sued
I know.
his,
There's
then he
been
sued
worse.
his agent.
Yeah,
after
there's
that.
been worse. There's been worse decisions made, but it wasn't. It was a very poor read of the market.
Yeah.
Where the market was at.
Yeah, so that was interesting there. I mean, other than that, it was all platitudes. He looks forward to playing with the Sixers.
Well, and look, he obviously landed on a contender, and I think the thing that's interesting here is, his quote about basically sometimes you take risks, sometimes it doesn't work out, but he didn't do. Sometimes you'll see guys who, when the market doesn't break right for them, they'll do the 1-year deal, they'll do the bet on yourself deal. He didn't do that. I guess he felt like, hey, I already left a whole lot of money on the table. I'm going to take what I can get. And he took a 4-year, $32 million deal instead of taking,
I believe there's a player option in there. So he can return to free agency still in his prime if he has a good run with the Sixers, and he'll be on a very relevant team. You
live and learn.
It's a huge win for Philly. Huge win for Philly to get it done. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, they got a proven quality playoff performer for well under mid-level money.
For sure. So Chris Paul met with the media in San Antonio today, and he explained that the big part of the decision for him to go to San Antonio, live away from his family, far away from his family, not just a short trip from San Francisco or Phoenix, his last 2 stops, was the opportunity because he wanted a big role. He did not want to sign somewhere where he was sort of relegated to a backup. Yes, Victor Wembanyama, of course, he was interested in that. Gave him a lot of praise, Greg Popovich, etc. But he wanted the role, and I think also left unsaid was he was probably facing a lot less money somewhere else. They gave him.
And there we go. That I think I think that's the real thing. I mean, I think we're talking about a situation, and look, it's a great situation for him to go there and be a mentor to Victor Wembanyama and throw him lobs and like that. It'll be a cool thing in the future for Victor, who have played with obviously one of the best point guards of all time towards the end of his career. I also think it's fair to say, is Chris Paul really in a different situation than the one Kyle Lowry's in right now? No, I wouldn't say so. Other than that, Chris Paul looked at it and said, if I'm going to go play for a really good team, I'm probably going to sign for a minimum. or I can get $12 million to play with Victor Wembanyama. And he chose option B. I think that's, say what you want about the role. I think it was the difference in $8 or $9 or $10 million that really won the day ultimately. And by the way, he's on a 1-year deal. He could maybe get traded to a contender in January, February, and play the end of the season on a contender somewhere.
Possibly. But look, I do think the opportunity to play a significant role I think it mattered more than the money, honestly. The guys, and look, every rich person wants to be richer. We all understand that, whether it's the billionaire owners or the multimillionaire players. But Chris Paul's made $390+ million just in salary in his career. And trust me, if you know Chris Paul, he's managing every dollar that he makes.
Well, but for example, don't we think he could have probably got a very large role in Phoenix where he used to play if he wanted to play on a minimum there?
Well, I'll say this. That would also, they dumped him. I think pride is a big part of this. Pride in terms of wanting a starting role. Pride in terms of, hey, you thought you were better without me. Fine. But
and I would say pride in not being a minimum player also, which is not, I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's negative. And I agree he wants to play. I think the fact that they were the ones offering $11 or $12 million is a pretty big factor here. That's all.
Yeah, I would agree as far as not wanting to be quote unquote a minimum player, and especially not a minimum player who's going to be a 9th or 10th man or not have a significant role, even if he's playing 15 minutes a game or whatever. Like CP3 is more than happy to be a coach on the floor, but the on the floor part there is critical. He's not signing up to be an assistant coach, your 4th front row assistant.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the fit. I think it's going to be great, and it's going to be great for Victor. And like we talked about the other day, it's going to be, I think, a perfect situation for the Spurs to have him come in there, him and Harrison Barnes, 2 veteran guys, show these young guys how to go about the job, how to live your life on a daily basis. You certainly can help a guy like Stephon Castle, their top 4 pick that they drafted, can help him get accustomed to and acclimated to the NBA game, can help Victor a ton. I love the fit from that standpoint. I think it's going to be a really good situation for him.
I think it's probably both. I think
exactly. That's all.
The fit. It's kind of like, so Harrison Barnes was also introduced today with Chris Paul, and he was asked about waiving his trade kicker to come to the Sixers or the Spurs. And he was like, oh man, this was an easy decision. The opportunity to come here, Popovich, Wembanyama, Chris Paul, et cetera, et cetera. That's all true. Also, going from playing in California to playing in Texas.
He's good at math.
He's still going to be ahead. I mean, he still could have got the extra $2 million.
He's done that before. He's made that transition. He knows.
That's right.
He knows exactly how those state income.
That's right. He got traded to make room for Durant. Not the first time he's been cleared out.
And again, another guy who has made a lot of money in his career, not as much as CP3, but he's made 9 figures, and he is a businessman. I mean, these are guys who, CP3 used to be the president of the union. HB is, I forgot what his exact title is, but he's, an executive in the union. I mean, these guys, they know the business. I talked about, I think they're going to be really, really good for the young Spurs as far as, the mentors and show you how it's done. I also think, though, these guys are going to provide a structure to the offense that they desperately missed last year. And I'm telling you, I think the Spurs are going to be a frisky team this year. I'm not saying they're a playoff team. I'm not saying they're a play-in team. I think they're a competitive team.
They'll definitely be a frisky and competitive team. I just think they're going to be a lot closer to 30 wins than 40. That's all.
Let's make a dinner wager. You give me
over
on 30.
Well, no, I mean, no. Why would I do that? We agree on that. You were the one saying they could win 42 or 44 games the other day.
I said 40 or 42.
We should set an over under for them at 37.
So what you just said, they're going to be closer to 30 than 40. You suck.
Yeah, so 30. Yeah, you're saying 40 to 42. I'm saying around 30. So 36 and a half. They win 37 or more, you win.
34 and a half, and I'll take it.
Well, I'm not doing that. You're the one talking about over 500.
I hope you lose money on slot machines this week.
We can discuss it further. Maybe we can come up with a number. I think 36.5 for how you've talked about him.
By the way, you never told us who won our preseason wins pool draft.
I have that, and I could pull it up. We could talk about it later in the pod. There's a tease for later.
All
there
right.
you go.
About that.
Also introduced on Tuesday, Dejounte Murray in New Orleans. He did not waive his trade kicker. It's $12 million.
No, he did not.
But you know what? He's also again, I was surprised he signed that extension last year.
Well, the extension was a little bit less than some people thought he would get. However, he did get a trade kicker in there, and the extension just got like 8% more. It just, it bumped up. So Zion Williamson attended the press conference, which I think is always, it doesn't mean everything, but when a player comes out of his way to attend something like that, it's an extreme vote of confidence. And, Dejounte said he didn't say anything inflammatory about the Hawks or his relationship with Trae Young, which again is what you're there to see. Is there anything you're going to say about that? No? Okay. Because remember, when he went to Atlanta from San Antonio, he fired a couple of, firecrackers back at the Spurs.
Yeah.
It was unusual to hear that. He did not do that today. But one thing that he did say, with Zion sitting a few feet away from him, he's like, I'm going to push him. And by the way, a lot of times when this happens, when a player shows up at a new coach press conference or the new player, the player sort of stands in the back, doesn't want to take attention. Zion sat in the front row. Hey. And Dejounte got asked about it, and he pointed to Zion. I don't know if he pointed. I didn't see. I just read the quotes. But he, indicated to Zion. He's like, I'm going to push him. So I think the Pelicans like hearing that. I don't know if that's really in his personality, but
it's newsworthy that Zion is in New Orleans at this point of year. That indicates to me he's probably working out at the facility with their staff, making an assumption, but
I'd have to check with Andrew Lopez, but my initial feeling is that you're right. Zion is kind of known for leaving New Orleans. When he had the injury 2 years ago, he left. I think he went to Oregon or something in mid-season.
Yeah.
It's not a bad sign.
No, again, that to me would be encouraging. Just, if you're in the team structure with their player development guys, assistant coaches, their strength and conditioning people, all that stuff, that to me would be a really encouraging development.
Yeah. Mikal Bridges had his press conference on Tuesday. Bontemps was saying earlier that the Knicks almost never hold press conferences. So that in of itself was newsworthy, Bontemps.
I mean, Leon Rose hasn't had one in several years. They didn't have one for Jalen Brunson. They didn't have one for RJ Barrett's extension. They didn't have one for just about anything. So the fact that they announced
they have one for
Mikal Bridges.
Here's a question on the Knicks front, by the way. Will they have one for Jalen Brunson, an extension this summer?
Well, my guess is the reason the Knicks had this press conference, I have not asked the Knicks or anyone around the Knicks, but this is just my guess, is because they took Mikal Bridges from the Brooklyn Nets and they wanted to have a press conference to sort of rub that in the faces of the Brooklyn Nets, that they traded 1 million draft picks to get the star player from the team across town. That is my supposition as to why they broke their very long tradition of not doing any sort of live press conference. And if I had to, I shouldn't even say, because I'll probably get aggregated, but
maybe Mike Breen asked for the day off, said, hey, I can't do this MSG Network interview. You got to let the newspaper guys do that.
Listen, if anybody is going to take as much less money as Jalen Brunson would in that extension, it's Jalen Brunson. That's what I will.
Well, let's just briefly say, Bridges called it surreal, everything platitudes.
Andrew Lopez, by the way, says that Zion is typically in New Orleans, so it's not that notable he was there.
Okay,
just asked him.
Good job.
Okay.
So Jalen Brunson is eligible for an extension in the very short-term future here. It's probably even this week. As you know, he signed for about $25 million a year, 4 years and $100 million when he came to the Knicks. He can opt out of his contract after next season. He can extend right now, and he can get a raise off of that $25 million. I think he can sign for the neighborhood of He can add
I think it's
3
4
years.
for 156 is the extension,
all right.
something like that.
If he waits another year, now granted, that puts 156 in your bank account. It's huge money. Also,
Exactly.
second,
100 million more than the Mavericks could have had him for.
you love to bring that up. The
True.
Mavericks are doing okay.
They are. I'm just telling you.
They'd have been doing a lot better if they didn't have to trade, make up for losing Jalen Brunson.
That's true. Okay. Leave the Mavericks alone. So 156 in the second apron era, him's taking less because that would be significantly less than the max. His max would be 4 and over 200.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. It would really help the Knicks keep all these guys together, all the Villanova boys together. And
podcast would flourish, the roommate show.
That's right. Who knows
Well,
what
look,
kind of
he and Bridges can do the same thing extension wise. They could both extend off lower numbers and potentially give this group even more runway.
Right, but Bridges
can't
together. Extend for 6 months now. Bridges.
No, I don't mean now. I just mean over the course of the next year.
Yeah,
they both have the ability to do that.
That's right. Or, as you said, Brunson can wait until next summer, opt out of his contract. The Knicks would have full bird rights after 3 years, and he can get the full boat max for and the cap will go up 10% next year.
Mm-hmm.
And so the max will go up 10%. And he could sign for probably, I haven't looked at them, probably in the neighborhood of 220 million. It's in excess of between 50 and 70 million.
And he would be leaving as much money on the table as we have seen any NBA player.
And considering he's on a contract right now that is significantly under market value, it's not the Knicks' fault. It's not even Jalen Brunson's fault.
Well,
everybody thought that
of overpaying him at the time it was signed.
By many people, they were accused of I thought it was an overpay. I thought he was a good player. I didn't know he was going to be I didn't know he was going to be on my MVP ballot 2 years later.
Yep.
So I will say, like, I don't know what he's going to do, but if he extends this summer, it's a gigantic win for the Knicks.
Well, there's a couple things here. One, what you guys are talking about in terms of really essentially guaranteeing that they keep the Nova Knicks together long term, just about, right? I mean, if he takes that much.
Let me tell you about trusting an NBA team to guarantee keeping guys together.
But if you're going to trust, if Jalen Brunson is going to trust somebody, an executive, it would probably be his godfather.
Fair.
You know, so like there's family ties.
There's a lot of family ties here on all sides between the college stuff.
What if it doesn't work? What
stuff.
if the Nova Knicks don't work? What if they're the best they are is second place? Like,
okay, I mean, but you're right. I'm presenting the why might he leave that much money on the table. There's that, and then Bontemps, you've probably heard this yourself, but anytime you talk to Rick Brunson, like when I talked to him during Jalen's last playoffs in Dallas, one of the first things Rick Brunson mentions is he played 9 years in the NBA.
Yep.
9 years on non-guaranteed contracts.
He must have had a terrible agent.
Yeah, the guy's done all right. The guy actually is not even an agent anymore.
He drummed out of the business. The guy was drummed out of the business. He was so bad. Can you imagine a player getting 9? By the way, I think the most of them were non-guaranteed.
There were 9 years. That's the thing. That's what
they were all non-guaranteed.
He never ever had a guaranteed contract.
How did Leon Rose make it in this industry?
He was
he could get.
Because he was a journeyman, right? I mean, he was a journeyman who had to. And he like played in the CBA during that time. But point being, he had to scrap for every nickel he ever made playing basketball, and that's why they were so determined to, hey, when that 56 million is available, we're pouncing, baby. And then it got to a point where they felt, okay, you don't appreciate us, and we've outplayed that. Now we're going to play it out now. But in New York, they feel appreciated. It's $156 million, and I'm telling you, so you've got that kind of mentality.
And he's also now making a ton of money off the court because he is the guy who's figured out that if you are the star of the Knicks, you are a god in New York. And Jalen Brunson is as close. Good. Well, that's what I mean. You're as close to a god as you could be in American sports if you're the best player on the Knicks. Look at Carmelo Anthony. He's going to live off being the best player on the Knicks for 5 years for the rest of his life. And Jalen Brunson's already had more success playoff wise than Carmelo did in his whole run with the Knicks, and he's just getting started. So yeah, like I'm not saying it's making up for the money he's leaving on the table, to be clear, if he does do that, but Jalen Brunson is, I think, more than smart enough to know that life in New York right now is very, very
Jalen Brunson was finally, somebody was like, I want to go be a star in New York. Somebody finally took it. It only took a decade.
And again, I'm not sitting here telling you that he's going to sign.
Neither am I. I don't know what he's doing either.
I'm just telling you why it's a reasonable possibility, which the vast majority of the time you'd say there's no way in hell a guy who was all NBA, as he's going into his prime is going to leave that much money on the table.
So Leon Rose and Rick Brunson love telling the story about the 9-9. I didn't remember they were all non-guaranteed. During this year's playoffs, it was before one of the games in New York, they fell into it with Lee on the sideline and same sort of jokes, Leon joking about how bad Evan aging was, blah, blah, blah. So I said to him, I go, well, if you've got 9 years of service time, you must have a pretty good pension. And I was serious. Like, I mean, that's one thing. You got 9 years. And he goes, pension? My pension's number 11.
That's right. Not bad.
That's also got to be baked into the decision. So we'll see. Bridges is down the line. He'll may come to that. But yeah, if they can talk Jalen into that, and there's Jalen can sell.
There's no talking Jalen into it. Jalen's either gonna tell him he's gonna do it or not. They're not talking him into anything. It's what does Jalen Brunson want to do?
Listen, Mark Cuban had everything locked up with Jalen until that meddling dad got involved and got him twice as much money in a big
second round pick, right on that wrist. Second round pick, bam. They should put that up in the rafters. Second round pick.
Hey, that is a hell of a draft, though. When you've got two guys on the MVP ballot in the same draft. Now, one of them ended up somewhere else, but still.
Yes.
I remember our former colleague Chad Ford used to cover the draft for us, and the year that the Heat traded for Shaq, I guess it was the second year that they had Shaq. They won the title, and that draft pick ended up, going to Phoenix or going to the Lakers for Shaq. And he got to the draft grades, and the Heat had like the 28th pick, but it went to the Lakers, and it was like Heat traded this pick for Shaquille O'Neal. Heat won championship 2 weeks ago. Grade A.
Yes,
A the draft. And the Heat did that again when they traded all those draft picks for LeBron and Bosh. They got a bunch more A's. All right. So okay, I think was that all the press conferences that were had today? Did I forget one of them?
Kevin Durant.
Well, for sure, we'll go to Team USA in a second. But all the new player press conferences, did I forget any?
Did DeMar have one?
I think he might have had one today. He did media of some sort today, but I didn't see what he said.
It has come out that the third year of that contract is, only $10 million guaranteed.
Partially guaranteed, yeah.
Still, though, he did pretty well considering that there was no cap space available. He ended up
look, they got to a decent place, and I'm very intrigued by that Kings team. Like we talked, I think we talked about it the other day. Very very intrigued by how they're going to fit all these pieces together. Could be a little bit of an imbalanced roster. Got Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox. It's a lot of offensive weapons, possibly too many offensive weapons to balance out. But, Keon Ellis, who's come on as a interesting undrafted player over time, is probably going to have a pretty huge role for them as their starting guard next to De'Aaron Fox. And Keegan Murray is going to have to take on a pretty big role in the front court defensively. But it's going to be a really interesting team in SAC. And it's going to be fun to see how it goes.
Yeah, he did talk today, and one of the things he said was he had a conversation with Harrison Barnes, and he told him all kinds of things about DeMar told him all kinds of things about living in San Antonio, and Barnes told him all kinds of things about living in Sacramento.
Yeah.
It's probably too late to do a house swap, at least.
I assume that DeMar unloaded his house. I'll tell you what, though, there's some nice houses in San Antonio, boy. There's, I find myself advocating for San Antonio over the last few months. I feel like, for years I was like, somebody's going to go to the Knicks. Somebody's going to go to the Knicks. And people were like, when is someone going to go to the Knicks? And I was like, maybe no one's going to go to the Knicks. Now I'm advocating for San Antonio. Like, Who wants to go there and play with Victor? Who wants to go there and, live in a good climate and a great tax situation in a growing city? Somebody's going to go there. It sounds like Chris Paul and
We're going to
Harrison.
need a Chamber of Commerce shirt for window here
I'm just
soon.
saying.
And listen, they've got velvet tacos down there too.
They got Buc-ee's and they got velvet tacos.
I'm telling you, and they got barbecue. It's not a bad deal. Their arena's
and it's a very close drive to Austin.
Well, their arena's a very close drive to nowhere.
It's across the street from a graveyard.
That is true. That is true.
All right, San Antonio, or more on San Antonio for the next 6 months when you guys tell me I was right about that, and MacMahon wins the bet.
You were the one talking last week about how they're
right about what?
About how getting there is going to be a smart move.
Dude, you were just telling us last week they were tanking.
I agree. I say they're doing a semi-tank. I'm just saying it's going to look like a good place to be. That's my point.
They're running your butt out of town.
Who is arguing with that?
You're arguing.
The sky is blue at 11.
You're arguing with it.
Wendy's going out.
Arguing with that San Antonio's going to yes, Victor's going to be great for a long time. No one's arguing that.
That's what I was looking for.
No one's arguing that point.
This guy who was hyped up for 5 years before he was the unquestioned number one pick in the draft.
Listen, he discovered Chet. He discovered Chet. He discovered Victor. He's already completely denigrated Cooper Flagg. He's
I did not do that.
Out of the league.
He's
never getting in the league.
Flying all the way back to France for another 90-second interview with Victor.
That's right.
Victor is only doing pre-Olympic interviews in French.
What?
That's what I heard.
What else would he be doing?
Well,
it's not like he's over here. It's not like he's over here.
What do you know outside of wee?
Listen, in FIBA press conferences, the standard is to speak English. That's the standard. All right. Kevin Durant, speaking of the Olympics, Bontemps, you wrote a story with an update on Kevin Durant. Please share with us.
The update is Kevin Durant will not be playing in a game tonight, Wednesday night, against Team Canada, the rematch from the bronze medal game in last year's World Cup. Durant has not practiced yet with a calf strain that he said he suffered about 10 days before camp opened. Everyone continues to say it is not a big deal. For my personal watching of Kevin walk around, I did a sit down with him that's going to air, I think, on Wednesday also on TV. He's not walking around with any limp. He looks fine. Obviously we're only able to see a very small bit of the actual stuff these guys are doing. So it's hard to know a lot of what's going on. But they continue to stress it's not a huge deal. And Durant said he hopes to play in the Abu Dhabi portion of the trip. They have games next Monday and Wednesday against Australia and Serbia in Abu Dhabi. But given Durant's history, given the fact that this is a very quick run up to the Olympics, it is certainly a concern that he has got a calf issue, and it will be interesting to see whether you get to see him play next week, Brian.
It is a concern for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
When's the sit down you have?
Yeah, can you pull back the curtain on?
Have you already done it?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we did. There was a car wash this weekend where they did. All the players came through and did a bunch of media. And I talked to both Embiid and Durant on Saturday.
So I can't submit a question. I can't submit the, hey, are you just ducking the smoke with Dylan Brooks question?
No, there is no, that this was done well ahead of that. The Canadians are practicing right now. Here at UNLV, they're practicing in the evening. Team USA is practicing in the afternoon. I went to practice last night. Dylan Brooks is in a good mood, as are the rest of the Canadians, and we will see how that game goes on Wednesday.
Let me just say something about the Canadian team real quick. So Jamal Murray has not signed his contract extension with the Nuggets. The Nuggets signed two players, I believe yesterday, Vlatko Kanchar and Dario Saric. They signed both of them after their national team service was up. The Slovenians were eliminated in the Olympic qualifying tournament with Kanchar, and Dario Saric before getting into a fight alongside Ivica Zubac.
Both eliminated by Greece. Slovenia and Croatia eliminated by Greece.
Yeah, and then they got swung on in a Greek bar.
I think one of the bouncers put the Draymond on old Dario. Looked like it was from behind, little chokehold. Shaky cell phone footage, but that's what it looked like to me.
Tell you what, you better be careful messing with big Croatians.
Dude, who's messing with the Vika Zubats?
That was the first thing I said. Zubac is a large human. And I mean, Dario Saric is 6'10" too. He ain't a small guy, but Zubac is a mountain. I would not be going near him.
Listen, I'll just tell you also the Slovenians, because I'll just tell you back in 2006, I was in Sapporo, Japan at the World Championships, and the Slovenians had qualified that night to move on to the quarterfinals in Tokyo. And the Slovenians and their fans were celebrating at this establishment that I was at. And a gentleman, an American who shall not be named, was, a few hops in and said, there was a disagreement over a dart game. And this individual said, you guys were better off when you were part of Italy.
Oh.
And I'd like to thank Primoz Brežić and Boštjan Nakbar and their fathers, who came over and
legendary net, one of Bobby Marks' favorite dudes.
Yes.
I'd like to thank all of them, the Slovenians, for disarming that situation. Otherwise, I might have ended up alongside somebody in the hospital that night. Anyway, I wouldn't mess with the Slovenians.
I believe the only Slovenians who were first-round picks before Luka, if I'm not mistaken.
I would think that's correct. Yeah.
That Slovenian
team was a second rounder, right?
That's right. That Slovenian team was pretty good, by the way. Anyway, I wouldn't mess with them. But the Nuggets didn't sign Saric or Kanchar until after they were done with their national team service. Obviously, last year, Kanchar tore his ACL during the World Cup.
Yeah.
And missed all of last year. And Jamal Murray hasn't signed. He doesn't have to sign. He's got 1 year left. He could play it out and try to get all NBA, but obviously Jamal Murray has a history of injuries, had an injury, couple of injuries, late in the season and in the playoffs. So that
I saw him at practice Monday night and he looked good, but obviously, we'll see how the next 6 weeks go for him and for Team Canada. By the way, if we could take Team Canada's guards, we could take France's bigs, we could put them together. Geez. That would be a team to truly go toe to toe with the American team. Unfortunately,
all of these teams,
Team Canada is short on guards and Team France is short on bigs.
I know.
The other way around.
The other way around. It's been a long few days. I'm very tired.
I mean, look,
Team Canada is short on bigs and France is short on guards.
Team USA is blessed with the reality that if Kevin Durant misses time, and by the way, there's one pool play game that is going to be stressful, probably Serbia. And so really Durant isn't truly needed for 3 weeks. You don't want him to just jump in there and everything, but their backup to Kevin Durant is Jason Tatum or Kawhi Leonard. Okay.
Yeah, or Drew Holiday or Anthony Edwards or Anthony Davis. Right. I mean, it's a ridiculous team.
And by the way,
in a 3-game series, forget about a 7, in a 3-game series, I would never think the USA was losing, but these are all one-off games.
Sure.
So I'm telling you, and it's weird basketball, and the refs don't give the Americans calls, and it's in France, and blah blah blah, and so it is not a done deal. I don't care what anybody says.
Canada does have NBA bigs, at least. They've got Kelly Olynyk. They've got.
I mean, that's the thing. They have Olynyk and Dwight Powell. They have Kem Birch, who's playing in the league. They've got Trey Lyles, who's a
don't
decent
have
four.
Zach Edey, though, who just made his summer league debut in Salt Lake City. Actually, an interesting game. I don't know if you guys saw any of that.
I saw it. He had an incredible tip-in at the buzzer to send the game to overtime. It's one of the best tip-ins off a missed free throw you'll ever see.
As far as summer league big man matchups, I mean, Zach Edey versus Walker Kessler's pretty high up there.
By the way, the Utah Jazz have broken a record. I don't have an official tally here, but I'm calling it a broken record that will probably stay broken forever. According to my math, they have 13 players on their summer league team who are under contract.
Wow.
If you include the two ways.
Okay.
13.
So the only ones who aren't on the roster who or on the real roster, but not on the summer league roster, would be Markkanen, Sexton, Clarkson. Is that the list?
There might be one more.
All right.
I don't have it in front of me. If it's not 13, it's 12.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Well, and they
You
still
know.
lost last night.
They did because they can't stop the Canadian Zach Edey, who had a double. All right. I think are we able to move on to the results from the preseason wins pool?
Sure. We could do whatever you want.
Your podcast, just let us come on.
That's right.
What do you mean?
Sure. It ain't Tim Bontemps in the Hoop Collective.
That's right.
In the Hoop Collective.
That's
We
right.
don't even get like
yeah, well, we've been doing this for like 8 years, buddy.
Well, who you telling? We just want damn fine.
We're available. We know we're available. So 2 years ago, first time we did this,
he must not have done well, MacMahon, because he's gonna read his victories.
No, I have the both years in the same file.
I fear this one because if you do recall, I had the first pick and took the freaking Bucks.
So 2 years ago, MacMahon with the second pick took the Bucks, and that was a good pick. And he went on to win, finished first. Brian finished second, and I finished third. This past year, MacMahon had the first pick, took the Bucks, wound up with a total of 398 wins across his 10 teams. Brian had the second pick, took the Celtics, pretty good pick.
Thank you.
They won 64 games. He wound up with 397 wins, one short of MacMahon.
Oh.
And I took the Nuggets with the third pick and wound up with 436
Oh,
wins
he trounced us.
I regret asking.
Trounced us.
But this, hold on. This all came down to show how random this is, really. It all came down to me taking Houston in the second to last round of picks because Houston obviously had 41 wins and Charlotte had 21 and San Antonio had 22. And if either of you guys had taken Houston and I had taken Charlotte or San Antonio, you guys would have won. So that's how close it was.
All right. Spurs, I still believe in you over 34.5 this year.
But it is interesting to go back and look, like, just because of where teams were at the time. So Brian stole the Clippers.
I'm prepared to take the Celtics again. I'll
you should be.
Yeah.
But Brian got the Clippers at like 17th. They ended up with 51 wins. Minnesota went, I believe, 12th. They had 56 wins. Thunder went 11th. They had 57 wins. Obviously, Orlando went late.
That was after the Thunder propaganda all summer long. Just finishing our breakfast and
Dallas was drafted in the back half. They won 50 games. Magic were drafted, I think 18th. They won 47 games. Pacers were drafted 20th by MacMahon. They won 47 games. So it's just interesting to see, looking back on it, where some of these teams ultimately landed. And obviously, Houston was way better than we expected in phase 2 of the launch.
Phase 3 on the horizon.
They paused on phase 2. They didn't cash in those chips yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Did Durant say anything about inflammatory about speculation about him wanting traded? Or was that
I didn't ask him directly about being traded. He said something to Vinny Goodwill. I don't think it was too great of a quote. The most interesting thing that he said on the Suns part was he likes their team. He's excited about them having a second year with this group together. He thought that they, I should say, left a lot of wins on the table last year. I'm trying to pull up this quote real quick if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I like our team. You got me, Brad, and Book, who can go off and do a lot of different things on the basketball court. We built some good pieces around us. So, yeah, I love who we are. I feel like we gave away a lot of games last year, and we won 49 of them. I feel like we easily could have won 55 or 60 games if we would have fine-tuned some things here.
Top 4 roster.
I like who we are. I feel like every team has got better in the West and some teams in the East as well. It's going to be a competitive league, but I like who we are. So I thought that was an
Well,
interesting answer in
you
light of some of
guys-
the stuff around him.
You guys know I think I'm a pretty big defender of Kevin Durant. I will. One of the things to get me
Another
back
very controversial take, MacMahon. Kevin Durant is awesome.
a lot of people.
This guy is going to be one of 7 30,000 point scorers in NBA history.
Hey, listen, I run into this all the time where people want to denigrate his championships.
Oh, that's 100% true. People like the whole. I hate when people want to. Well, what's Kevin Durant's legacy? I don't know.
Yeah.
The
Kevin
guy's
Durant's legacy is he's the greatest basketball scorer of all time. That's what it is.
All right. So I have had many conversations saying the exact same thing, defending his role in winning those championships in Golden State.
I could watch Kevin Durant shoot jump shots all day, every day.
And he shoots them all day.
Yes, he does. And makes them all the time.
The fact that he talks about how people just use him wanting to leave as a click generator. I mean, anytime a star wants to leave, it's a click generator, of course. But he has wanted to leave many times.
Yeah.
He's wanted to leave very good teams many times.
It has been accurate on a repeated basis.
Right. So I will, have to throw a flag on him getting a defensive about that.
I did. There was an interesting, I did ask him about that actually, because we talked a little bit about Klay, not surprisingly, because the two of them were in the Bay and I was out there with them when they were with the Warriors all together. And I asked him, what is it like to leave a team in free agency? Sort of like, what's the mindset you get into if you're a guy like Klay and you decide, all right, this is the time for me to move on, like we've talked about. Well, that is an interesting answer. He goes, at the end of the day, you're not really doing anything different. You're still playing ball. It's the same routine. Clay's not going to change up who he is as a player and how he operates as a player because he's got a new jersey on. He might have a new route to practice, or he might need some new people to deal with different weather, some new people to deal with or with different weather, but nothing else is changing. I think a lot of people don't realize that nothing changes, but maybe some small house cleaning type things. For the most part, Klay is a vet. He knows how he's going to come in. He feels like he can do that on any continent in the world.
Well, that's obviously how Kevin feels. I think Kevin's talking about himself.
I just thought it was very interesting because as he was talking about Klay leaving, and like he said all the things you'd expect, that Klay's a legend there and it's going to be a legend there and it's always going to be the case, which is certainly all true. It made me think about what you have been in this position a couple of times and like, what is it like to decide that?
Well,
so,
and
that was interesting.
It's different in this sense. KD never left because he felt underappreciated. Or he never left because the team that he was playing on didn't desperately want to keep him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He was never a secondary priority in summer plans.
He never said it's good to feel wanted again at his arrival press conference.
Right. Now,
now,
he was coming off obviously a major injury when he went to Brooklyn. So I'm not saying it's always been peaches and cream and all that kind of stuff. But I think Klay's got a different sort of, whether you want to call it a chip on your he has something to prove in Dallas. I don't think KD's ever had at his previous stops.
He also had a great quote about Victor. Asked him what he expects from Victor going forward. He's obviously a guy who watches as much basketball as anybody. Brian will like this in particular, I think. It's just hard to see because the incredible can happen. It's a pretty great quote, I thought.
Remember Victor's first, oh yes, God, game.
Those 2 games against the Suns.
Yes. And the I don't remember if it was the first or second, but the one where he was just scoring every bucket down the stretch. And it's crazy because there are shades of KD in Wemby's offensive game at 7'14" or whatever he is.
I mean, that's who he clearly wants to be. That's who he wants to play like. Like you see a guy who's 7'5" and you think he's a center. And like from the very beginning, he's clearly tried to play like Kevin Durant and be catching on the move and scoring and doing that kind of stuff.
There's some people who, as you know, Victor claims to be 7'4" or 7'3". I don't even know what he does.
Yeah, he's 7'5" plus.
Boy,
there are people that are like studying camera angles and stuff who now believe he's actually 7'6".
Yeah, he's at least 7'5". It's really not debatable.
When he's standing next to Rudy Gobert,
makes Rudy look small.
Rudy comes up to like his nose.
Yeah.
I mean, my God.
Yeah. I mean, he's at least 7'5". He's huge.
Yeah. All right. good stuff. Keep grinding out there, Bontemps.
Well,
Got
the
one more
grind is
day.
basically over. We got the game tomorrow, and then thankfully a day of quiet, and then summer league starts on Friday. The debut potentially of Bronny James here in Vegas.
Yeah, for sure. Later
Gonna
this
be
week,
Reed Shepherd.
I'm headed over to the Middle East to join Team USA. Two really good games, as Bontemps mentioned, Australia and Serbia. I'm not sure that Jokic will play in that game because it's the second night of a back-to-back. So hopefully he will. Yeah, but I don't know. But especially since the Serbians and the U.S. play in the first game of the Olympics. So
I'm going to take a
but-
guess right now that he is not playing. We'll see
Yeah,
if Kevin Durant is playing. That's the more interesting one. At this
True.
point.
All right. We will talk to you later this week. Thank you to Jackson, our producer. Thank you to Bontemps and MacMahon. Thank you for listening and watching Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you soon.
Adios, amigos.